Okay, so last night it was very pressed upon my spirit to talk about how fear keeps us out of our place of destiny. And we see this example in the Bible when Moses is leading the Israelites out of Egypt. They keep talking about how they much rather would have died in Egypt. They would have had graves and things like that. And they spent the whole book of Numbers wandering around the same mountain just because they were afraid of what was waiting for them in the promised land, afraid of the trials and triumph and the path and the process of reaching the place where God has called them to be. So to start this off, I'll give a couple of anecdotes about my own personal life and some fears that caused me, I'll say, some delay in some areas, and then looking at where I am now versus the beginning sprouts of that fear and how did I tackle those things. For me, I realized a lot of my fear was rooted in how would I be perceived? Whatever I do, how will people take that? Will they look at me differently? Will they not want to be around me? And that was one of the roots. And number two was putting everything on myself, thinking that if this doesn't work out, it's on me, and just holding on to the pressures of what it looked like to succeed, of what it looked like to excel in a given area of my life. One of the biggest fears for me was public speaking. That's number one. I remember in college, we had a class for my major, you had to have a public speaking class. And at that time, I'm like, as a biology student, why do I need that? What is the purpose of me having public speaking? Like, what am I going to do with this later? And as that class progressed, like in the beginning, I was so afraid to speak. I'm sure I stuttered several times. I would get nervous sweats and things like that. And I'm just like, I wanted nothing to do with that class. It was the easiest class I had, but it was the bane of my existence that first year of college. And so as time progressed, I realized and we started to form connections with the people in the classroom. I realized all the fear that I had about speaking was in my head, that all of us were attempting something new. All of us were giving the effort in which we could. And honestly, nobody was really paying that much attention to you and your ability to public speak. Yes, we were being graded on it by our teacher, but there were so many times of her giving constructive criticism, her encouraging us. And I had to sit back and be like, this is really not that bad. I'd rather it be here in this setting where it's expected for us to grow and learn from this, rather me to get out in the real world and, dare I say, have a presentation to present. And I can't do it because I am so overcome with the fear of speaking. And for honestly, it took some time to really get over that, because even after that class, I was still reserved and still would try to shy away from things like that, or things that would have me be front and center speaking. And so we go fast forward a little bit forward to where I am now. And the first thing to overcome that fear after coming into Christ, God laid it upon my heart to open up a Christian podcast called The Salome. I ran that for a couple of months, and honestly, to speak into the microphone and to not have an audience, so to speak, it was actually very, I want to say, it was very nerve-wracking at first, even though it was just me in my room with my microphone and my headphones, just recording audio. When I started to, advertise The Salome and started to get an audience of my peers and things like that, it became a little bit more serious. And then I'm like, God placed me to do this, and for this season, I'm okay with it. I have to take myself out of the center and actually tap in. What is it that God wants me to send out? What is the message that needs to be sent? What is it He's trying to show through me? And I need to take myself out of it, because it's not about me. It's about the message. It's about the word. It's about the seed that is being planted in the people that listen. And so after that, seeing some of my peers listen to the podcast and just getting feedback every so often about how it spoke to them in this area of their life, how it transformed or changed their mind concerning a thing. And I was sitting there like, wow, like God. And honestly, these, I'll say, reviews or tidbits, they would come in the moments where I felt like giving up. When I'm like, God, I've been doing this for a little minute. Should I keep going? This isn't really going how I expected. My schedule's getting a little bit busy. And as soon as those, I'll say, excuses started to emerge, I would get these testimonies of this certain podcast episode spoke to me about this. It helped me through this. And that was just like, God will reassure you when He has sent you out to do something. something, he will reassure you, he will strengthen you to continue on with what he has given you. And while, like, even though the Salome is, it's still up, but even though I'm not producing episodes on it right now, it led me into being able to speak via YouTube. Though it's just in my room in front of a camera, I know that it's going to reach people eventually as time goes. I know that there are people around me, in my circle, in my peer group, people wherever in the world that they may be, that will see this and will stumble upon it. And I'm just like, okay, it is what it is. This is the message that I have at this moment, at this time. This is what has been placed upon my heart. And this is how, like, God gives you the message, but it's up to you on how you, I want to say, present it. And so this is my presentation of that. Fear number 2 that I had was not being in control. So much so that I was afraid to fly in an airplane. I felt like taking road trips in my car, I had more control. Like, at least I'm the captain of this ship. Like, if anything happens, it's my fault and no one else's, and things like that. And that kept me from a lot of traveling that I wanted to do, just because I was afraid to perhaps allow myself to be on a plane or something piloted by someone else, not realizing that God is the source and he is the head of all these things that work and they go. It was not about putting my trust in the pilot or putting my trust in the flight attendants or the people on this plane or the engineers who built it, but putting my trust in God, surrendering everything that I was trying to hold on to or the sense of control that I needed in order to let God work, for him to show me that, I got you. If I sent you, you will make it there. You will be safe. You will be all right. If I am the one that is sending you, I am responsible for you. That in itself, well, it took a lot off of me, so much so that last year was my first time flying. And after that first time, I flew a couple of months later by myself. I got on the plane, flew from Georgia to California by myself for like a week. And yes, I've traveled alone several times, but to actually fly, keep track of my flight changes, my hotel, everything like that was new to me. And I will gladfully say, like, God did his thing. I had an amazing time, a safe time. I got back safe and sound, and there was literally no hassle. Even had there been hassle, I would have still looked to God as my source or as my comforter through that situation. And then just to harken off of, like, fear number 1, which was public speaking, being in these predicaments where I was traveling alone and forced to speak to people by myself. I remember I took a road trip to Daytona, and I drove all the way down there, and to just be on the beach by yourself, engage with new people. There is so much to be said, to be known, to experience just talking to people. And I'm not saying go out there and mingle with strangers. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying there is a lot to opening yourself up. When you're walking with God, you never know the people that you'll meet, the stories that you'll hear, the things that will edify you as a believer, the things that add to your testimony just by hearing someone else's. You never want to shut yourself out of hearing those things or experiencing all that God has for you in this lifetime. And by being afraid to fly, being afraid to do those things and conquer them by myself, I was robbing myself of that very thing that I know God has called me to do. Fear number 3 for me was a fear of imperfection. Throughout school, I always made all A's up until college, and that was my first C. And I was like, you know what? At this point, C's get degrees, and we're gonna rock out with that. And I just really, I held on, okay, as a very young child, I knew that I wanted to be a veterinarian. It was just something that I really wanted to do because I saw, I always watched the Animal Planet network. I would see the animal cops go into these situations and rescue these animals. And then the vets were like, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to get them to a new family. And I was so intrigued by that. I wanted to help. I wanted to be of service. I wanted to be a part of something greater than myself. And so as I finished undergrad and ended up vet teching for just a couple of months, I was like, you know what? This is not for me. This is not what I initially thought that veterinarians would do. I don't think that I took into consideration how we see animals at their weakest, vulnerable points, and how in their mind they may not comprehend everything that's going on, and sometimes they lash out of fear and out of confusion. And so just after seeing that for a couple of months, I was like, I think that I should just try something else. Honestly, it took so long for me to admit that to myself. It took so long for me to come into the realization that what I had initially set out to do at the age of 5, 6 years old was not the thing that I wanted to do now at my adult age. And it's okay. It's okay. But for me, that was not something I was willing to admit. And honestly, I can say now that I am grateful that I've accepted it, because there's so much more that I want to do and so much more that I want to speak and to say and edify and encourage the people of God. And just, I want to use my time doing that instead. Not saying I could not do that as a veterinarian, but there is something different, something greater that God had for me than I could have imagined for myself. Overcoming those fears came out of a surrendering to God, wanting to be renewed, not seeking to pick up where I left off, not seeking to stack on to my previous, but wanting to start all the way over. And honestly, in your 20s, that starting over, it seems like a nightmare, especially if you come from a place where you've always known what you wanted to do. You hearkened onto that. You set your career path on that to start over and be like, you know what, God, I don't know. I don't have the answers. I'm not sure what I'm doing here. It was in that place of surrenderance, that place of admitting that I don't know what I'm doing, that God was able to show me more, usher me into new passions and new hobbies, usher me into a place of walking in my purpose and being confident in that, not feeling like I have to dwindle and diminish myself for anybody else, but to, if I'm walking in my purpose, doing what God gave me to do, He's being glorified. I'm not seeking the glory. I'm not seeking anything from it, but to let people know the love of God, the transformation that comes from His love, the security that is provided within that secret place of being in His love, of being well kept in His love. That is honestly how these fears were tackled, how they were overcome. And I won't say I will not get on here and say that they don't reemerge from time to time, that there aren't areas of uncertainty, because there still is from time to time. But I know within my knowing that if I don't know, I can run to God. If I don't know, there are people in my life that God placed for me to seek counsel from, to seek advice from, and in somewhere, some shape, some form, the answer that I am seeking, the answer that I need, not what I want, is there, ready for me to hear it. And once that seed is planted, allowing God to water that seed, and when He waters that seed, that is allowing Him to expand and grow me in the way that He wants me to be, not how the world thinks that Chetehyast should be, not how my family thinks Chetehyast should be, but how God desires for me to be brought up. And honestly, that was another fear of mine. I didn't even write this one down, but it was fear of missing out, fear of missing out on events with people and things like that, not realizing I'm not missing out on anything. What is for me and what I'm designed to do, what I'm here to do, I'm walking in that. There are other paths and alleys and byways and highways that I could take, and you just have to know, like, it's okay to not be a part of that. It's okay to not be invited to this. But in that, where I'm going, where I'm walking, there will be opportunities that are more tailored to me, more tailored to the things that I desire as a person. And it's crazy, but I'll probably talk about this in the next episode about in the next video, talking about being set apart and recalibrated and how important that is to your walk. But if you made it this far, thank you for your time. Blessings to you and your family. May God elevate you and multiply you. May He instill in you what your purpose is, and may you seek Him in every endeavor. Until next time, peace.